All right, let's talk about fonts, baby. So I love talking about fonts, not just because I get to sing the Let's Talk About Fonts song, but because very few people realize the full power of typography to transform the look, feel, and experience of your site. So what do I mean by that? Well, in my work transforming the businesses of my clients, many of them were coming to me and they were complaining that their websites weren't getting results. They weren't getting them noticed as the authorities they were. They weren't generating enough clients and sales and on and on and on. And you can bet that I've seen some shockingly bad before examples. And here's one from product launch guru Minders Glover. Now, who is Minders Glover? So he's kind of a legendary figure in the field of online product launches. So if you've got a product to launch on the internet, this is the guy to see. So he knows every different kind of way to launch a product, and he's executed dozens of successful launches, generating millions of dollars. But when he came to me, 100% of his business was coming from word-of-mouth referrals. In other words, his website was generating him pretty much no leads. When he told me this, I remember being surprised. I mean, how could a website be that ineffective? But when I checked his site out, it was obvious why. So I'm going to show you his before site now, and when you see it, if you can, I want you to focus primarily on the choice of fonts and not the overall design. So give me your first reaction in the chat box on whether these fonts fill you with confidence that this guy is really at the top of his game, one of the best in the field. All right, go. So how are you feeling? Even if you have no background in design, most of you are probably screaming at the screen right now. It just feels wrong, doesn't it? There's just something about this font that says amateur, untrustworthy, even cheap, right? It's sending off signals that says, I'm not serious. You don't need to understand why. Just recognize that you're feeling this way. So Minders and I worked together and came up with a new set of fonts, headlines, subheadlines, body copy, and accent fonts that really work to give him huge levels of credibility and authority. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a moment. But before I do, I wanted to check in with how you're feeling about those fonts. So I'm reading the chat here, and I see totally old-fashioned font. They look cheap, says Rachel. Shauna says the font is too small. Some Greek guy with crazy hair says boring fonts. And Sally says hard to read. Carol says nothing outstanding. All right, so going on. That's what you got to say. And now here is a new site that we just, sorry, I'm still laughing about the crazy hair. So I'm getting a little punchy after 2 weeks of doing the summit. So here is a new site that we designed for Minders. So it visually looks amazing. But again, I want to ask that you focus on the font palette above all else. So if you stripped away all the design, how would that choice of fonts make you feel? More or less confident that he knows what he's doing? So let me know in the chat, would these fonts help you feel more or less confident about what he's doing? So that's the big difference of a professionally designed font palette can have for you. So what exactly is a font palette? I don't know anybody else who talks about having a font palette. Everybody talks about having a color palette. But you can also have a font palette. So a font palette is a collection of 3 to 4 branded fonts that you use consistently across every web page you create, as well as all your other materials. Think of it like a simple branding shortcut that allows your prospects to make a decision in the blink of an eye, whether they're going to pay you with a little bit of their time and stay a little longer on your site. It sends a signal that you're no longer a Me Too, hobby business owner, and could be someone worth paying attention to. The right font palette not only adds to your company's brand, but it can actually increase your conversions by calling attention to exactly what you want your visitors to focus on. And I'll show you a really ninja way to do this in just a moment. Actually, I think I already showed you that. But first, let me walk you through the 3 to 4 fonts that make up your font palette. First of all, you've got your logo font, or the font you use to depict your company name, or if you've got a personal brand, your name. Next, we have header and title fonts that may or may not be the same as your logo font. If you use a fancy script or serif font in your logo, I would recommend using something simpler and cleaner for your header and title fonts. Since your headers and titles are the most important copy on your web pages, you want these to be as clear and eye-catching as possible. The right headline can double or triple conversions, especially if it's emphasized by the right font. So here's an example of the same headline in a poor font choice and a strong font choice. Can you see the difference? One looks elegant and professional, and the other just looks squat and ugly. So next up, we have your body copy, or the font that you use for the rest of your copy throughout your website. You want this to be as clear and legible as possible, and you want to stay completely away from script and serif fonts here. So let me show you what I mean. Here's a script font used for body text. It's almost impossible to read, right? And here's a serif font used for body text. All those extra flourishes on the letters work great in print, but not so great on screens. Now here's an example of a clean, clear, easy-to-read body copy font. You want this font to go under the radar. People aren't supposed to notice your body copy font, right? They aren't supposed to notice that font choice. You want them reading what you've written, not thinking about the font. That said, I do recommend keeping it 100% consistent across everything you do. Finally, our last font. This is something very few people know about or implement. This is what we call your accent font. This font can be a bit more playful, distinct, or branded to your business. Since accent fonts are used to create visual emphasis, it's common to choose a handwritten or script font here. So this allows you to use your accent font as a visual prompt to call attention to buttons or important text, or to divide sections of your website. So here's an example from the site I designed for Evan Markatz. So we use an accent font called D'Artagnan, and as you can see, we use this font for page dividers to emphasize different sections of the site, such as join 5 million readers, the text we use here to segment the top buying part of the homepage from the bottom value and blog part. So we also used his branded accent font for the Share the Love text that emphasizes the social share buttons on his site, as well as his blog categories. I also use accent fonts all the time, and here's an example from my Message to Money sales page. We use our accent font to emphasize and differentiate our pre-headline from the main headline below it. That just makes our top banner a little more fun and a little more interesting. And now here's where it gets really ninja. You've probably heard that once you've established your visual branding identity, it's really important to repeat the same visual branding elements over and over again, so people start to recognize your materials pretty much instantly at a glance. So we've done this really well across our businesses. So you can quickly recognize Superhero Summit's materials or Live Your Message materials. So once you've chosen your font palette, it's time to rinse and repeat. So here's a page from the brand book we give each of our Take Flight Now customers. You see it defines each of the fonts in your palette. So you can share these specifications with anyone who joins your team or creates materials for you. So a brand book makes it really easy for you to maintain consistency across your platform and materials. So you get that instant brand recognition that separates you from 99% of your competitors and instantly makes you look like the real deal. So we don't have time to go through the rest of this brand book. We actually give you a brand book at the end of Take Flight Now so you can take your brand with you. But when you're ready to get serious about your brand, I also recommend choosing a branded color palette, creating a custom logo, and defining the style of imagery that you want to use. So all of that is going to go into your brand book too. So I hope you can see that fonts are a powerful way to guide your visitors' attention and emphasize the key messages and elements on your site.
So what does a brand book do for you if you have a brand book too?
Okay, so a brand book really gives you brand consistency. So what happens a lot of times is you get a flyer for someone, and then you get something else from them, and then you kind of visit one of their web pages, and then you go to like a different squeeze page or sales page, and the fonts and the colors are different on every single page. So it's like there's no continuity there. There's no user experience that's created. They don't start to feel like, oh, that's Marissa's stuff. That's a Live Your Message site, or oh, that's a Superhero Summits page.